Okay, the purpose of this is to review some of the questions from the first in-class quiz for the purpose of edification and thinking towards the final, which is not that far away anymore. So it's really just going over some of the questions of concern that students had, that you all had, and describing some of the truisms of it, and we'll see what we've got as we go along. Okay, so here's what we have. Question number 2, the arm's length transaction test. The way to think of the arm's length transaction test is to think of it in terms of paying a salary to a related party, your family member. If you're paying a salary to a family member, is it deductible? Well, that's the question. A, for example, is it really a personal activity that you're paying the person for? Like, I want to pay for their college. I want to give them money for school. I want to give them money for spending. That's a personal activity. So if it's not arm's length, then that could be meaning that it's not deductible and it's a personal activity. So A is true, that the arm's length transaction applies to that. B, is it profit motivated? Again, same concept. Am I paying it for the purposes of a ordinary and necessary deduction of a business, or is there another motivation? And arm's length related party rules would dictate whether that's true or not. D, reasonableness. I think we would all agree from in-class discussion that if we're paying a related party, a family member, is it reasonable or not is difficult to say and requires a lot of tests, which is the arm's length transaction test, to see whether it's a fair salary or not. And so therefore related party rules or arm's length transaction tests apply to D. C, if it should be deducted, if the related party rules tell us that it's deductible, should it be deductible now or later? Well, that's an accounting method. It's no longer related to the related party rules or the arm's length transaction. It's purely an accounting method. So that's why D, or rather C, became the correct answer there. Here in number 3, a few questions came up on this one. Here, the cost of business entertainment must be reasonable. The regs say that, and that's the true statement there. An employer can only deduct half. Well, that's not true because there are some where it's 100%. Meals are always fully deductible. No, they're not always fully deductible. In fact, it's most of the time they're 50%. And a taxpayer can only deduct the full cost of the meal. If business is discussed after, no, it could be before and during. Doesn't have to be after. So it's not exclusive to that. And that's how that works. Okay, a couple of the true false. The number 10 became the most controversial question because, as it turns out, the test bank that got this from probably goofed in its answer, and therefore I'm going to say that this is the reason why the class curve was bumped up. Everybody gets bumped up the notch because this is a bad question. B was the answer per the test bank, and B is true. There is court cases and there's regulations to the effect that if an employee must work by the employer, meaning must work, concentrating on the word must, that cost of the meal is deductible. The question of how much is deductible comes up often, and the IRS takes the position here that what's deductible is the difference between the actual cost of the meal at the time versus the normal cost of the meal. So if you were to bring lunch, and how much would that lunch cost you normally if you brought it, that's the difference is deductible. A very unusual case. By the way, it's a rare circumstance, yet that's what they were looking for. Here, I'm not sure what the, in D, which is what most people thought the answer is, and I believe is a true statement also. Here, they were looking for, in the explanation of the answer bank, the fact that the cost of lodging is not 100% deductible, that you have to look at the amount of percentage time towards business versus personal. That's why the text or the test bank that I got this from felt that D was not a correct answer, and their explanation is that D is not true. The cost of lodging is deductible even if the primary purpose of the trip is business. It's not 100% deductible, and that's the way they were looking at the question. So again, agreeing with the class that it was somewhat ambiguous. That's why there was a curve to it. However, I think the test bank had some good rationalization for it. Those were the two questions that I think I recall seeing that gave people the most trouble, and so I'm not going to go too much over any others. This one here, this was in the text. It was also on a slide that I went over, and I mentioned it in class a little bit briefly, but it was there. And so that, I think, takes us through most of the ones that require additional explanation. If you have any questions that I'm not answering, feel free to email me, and I'll go over those. And that is that. Thank you.